All right, tell us your name and how you got to the church and all that, what you remember about that first day.
Well, obviously my name is Artie Manning. My mother and I were charter members of Hilldale Methodist Church, and we had gone through quite some times. My mother and father were married in Madison Street Methodist Church. I was baptized there, and as a child, we lost my father in the Korean conflict, and in 1954 is when I believe Hilldale started forming, and Mother wanted to get a fresh start on things, and this church was forming, and she decided that this would be a nice place to begin her Christian life anew, as we had just bought a new home up on Delmar Drive, which is right behind the Cumberland Grill now. That was our home. It was out on this end of town. This was the outskirts of town at the time. So we decided to come here. New church forming, a lot of buzz going around. I didn't know as many people, and you'll have to forgive me, 60 years leaves me a little void of good, clear information, but I'll give it to you as best I know how. When we decided when Mom decided to move out here and join this church, there were some questions that were going around. First of all, didn't have a building, and we were meeting in the cafeteria stage area, if you will, at Moore School. And we weren't here for the first service after looking at a picture that Skip, you and Nell brought in, and which reminds me that Mother beleaguered over that somewhat on leaving the church that we were established in and moving on to other places. So we were a little bit behind the game. But lo and behold, we did attend our first service there, and there was this tall, handsome gentleman by the name of Ben Binkley, who was leading the charge on the formation of the church. And my recollection is, as a child, was quite exciting. First of all, there were a lot of kids my age, and as I came to grow with him as pastor of this church, and later on as my stepfather, I call him my father, and he was a dandy and still is. He centered the growth of the church and the life of the church around the children of the church, and there were a lot of activities that went on. I was always excited to come to church, and as was Mother. And I'll just refer to Ben Binkley as Dad at this point, so we can press forward. Dad was very young. He was about 25, 26 years old, and Mother wasn't. Mother was about the same age, and having not had a real father figure around the house, Dad was a pretty exciting guy for me. And as luck would have it, after a few months, of course, he came and did his pastoral duties and visited all his parishioners, and he seemed to spend quite a few times at our house, which was okay. And Mom asked me if it was okay, and I said, sure, it's okay. And so I'm going to give you the background story, then we'll go into the growth part of it. He was an intriguing gentleman indeed, and in that fact, excuse me, he one day brought me a model Jaguar, a Jaguar vehicle, which I had never seen before. I had never seen anything like that before in my life, so he obviously knew how to charm a child. And it struck me, again, indeed, that he would care so much as to give something like that to me, and go from there. As time would shortly pass, he doted quite heavily on Mother, and shortly thereafter they were married, and we spent that 2 years raising Hilldale Methodist Church out of the ground.
Tell a story about you asking him to be your daddy.
Well, I was getting ready to do that, and that's a good one, Skip. I didn't know whether you want me to inject that. As I was saying, Dad spent quite a bit of time at our house, and it was after the car incident that he was there, and I think Mother was preparing a meal for us all, and Dad and I were in the living room. Mother was in the kitchen, which was just to our immediate left, and I said, Father Ben, are you married? And he said, no, son, I'm not. And I said, well, my mother's not married either. Would you marry my mom? And Mother screamed. I mean, she just was really taken aback by it. Dad chuckled, and I thought I'd committed the worst sin on earth. I was scared to death because I knew once he left, it was going to be Mother and I was going to have to deal with it. But as luck would have it, he took my prompt and proposed to Mother, and I was indeed very, very happy
that night
to accept it. Not that night, but it wasn't far from then that he accepted. It was in the courtship. He had a '48 Oldsmobile that was just the coolest car I'd ever seen in my life. And of course, me being a child, and Mother was really protective of me, having lost Daddy at an early age and at a very young age for her. So when they went on dates, frequently I went with them. And one of their favorite spots was out at Lock B. And we would sit on the side of the lock in the car and sing songs until I went to sleep. And of course, supposedly went to sleep at times. And so I was a sneaky little critter too. I wanted to see him kiss Mom, and of course he did. And as I recall, I drifted on off to sleep. So, great happening in Mom's life for her, to give her some happiness again, and obviously for me to have a male figure in the home, and so lucky to have had a man like him.
So you became a preacher's kid.
Yeah, and that followed me. I'll tell you, I don't. Do I want to go on? Do I want to go on with our lives as we go?
Yeah, go through your time here at the church.
Okay.
Go through your time here at the church.
I remember it looking so big when we first opened the doors and came in. And of course, all the stained glass windows were not done, and they've been done over time. And Mother and I sat 3 rows back on the right, and every Sunday. And of course, Dad preached, and I remember the clouds and the bibs, and those were the main 2 that I remember. Vic C. I'm sorry, I got to remember Victor because we were big buddies back then. And but as I said, as you can see from the photograph that we looked at, a lot of young people were my age and very, very close, and we had a good time. Downstairs at the time was the gathering spot, and before church, after church, during Sunday school, and this and that. So it was a great place to meet, and all the parents and the people in the church were so happy to have this building, and they were so proud of the work that they had done to get it out of the ground and have a place of worship that they could be proud of. They kind of got tired of going to more school. It got old, and as the bricks came up and the structure came up, the excitement level rose, and I vaguely remember the first service that we had here, and it was quite a glorious day, and again, a lot of excitement, and people were smiling and hugging each other, and very much like we do today. It wasn't that much different, but it was just so special, and every time I walk in the door, the memories that have stayed are so vivid and clear. And Skip, when you have Dad down here to preach, it really rolls back. And of course, as you age and as you get older, it's not that those memories are more fond, but you seem to grasp at them more and more, just by virtue of what they mean to you and the development of you as a human being in your Christian life, and what God means to you, and what Jesus is supposed to mean to you in your life. And having, Dad was never one of those kind of preachers, and you remind me very much of it, Skip. He never really pounded the pulpit. He was one of those guys that just talked to you, and he talked to you from the pulpit, and not let you know essentially what he believed, but he wanted to deliver a message on behalf of the writings of Jesus Christ and his followers, so you would have an understanding of what they could mean to you, and then it was up to you. And then if you want a little bit more, he had a little bit more. And if you want a little bit more, he had a little bit more. And
Tell us a little bit more about that first Sunday that you remember being in the sanctuary, being in this building.
well, I don't know that I was thinking about that on the way, Skip, and it's really difficult to remember. We had such adventures when we left here. All of it's kind of blended into one. The biggest thing that I remember really is Dad standing at the door greeting everybody coming in, and the parking lot was a gravel parking lot. It wasn't quite all polished like it is now, but it was still home, and everybody was. I really remember more than anything the excitement. I wish I could remember the sermon, and I promise you Dad has it. He saved every sermon he ever wrote.
We've got the bulletin.
Well, heaven only knows. Can you turn that thing off for just 1 second?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to roll back since you're going to edit this.
Okay.
When Dad came here, of course, he was a single man. I'm going to take a drink of water. And he lived just across the road on a hill with 2 elderly ladies, as best I remember. And this is after he and Mother had started dating. He got sick one weekend, and Mother would prepare food and soup and such and take it over there to him to help him on the road to recovery. Shortly after that, and I don't know how, essentially how this occurred, he and Charlie Warren shared a house together. And I can't do justice to Dad talking about Charlie and his adventures. They were polar opposites, but they were joined at the hip. They really were. Do you remember Charlie very well, Skip? Well, he was a hoot. From get-go, he was a hoot. And I think Dad was kind of inspired by him to, and Nell, you mentioned in some of Dad's humor, I can assure you that Charlie had something to do with it, because he was just a cut-up, and everybody loved him for it. But he was one of the strongest members that Hilldale had at the time, and one of the driving forces in helping this thing come out of the ground. Nell and I were talking while you were out getting some water. What were we talking about, Nell?
This was his very first appointment.
Very first church. He was, as I said, 25, 26 years old. But as I grew with Dad over the years and moved from church to church, I realized that his organizational skills were extremely astute. He knew what he was going to do with the children. He knew what he was going to do with the members. He knew what he was going to say and how he was going to deliver it. And the second part of that, budgetarily, in the fiscal responsibility of the church. He was an economics major at Vanderbilt. That was his degree. So he was very, very strong in the fiscal management of the church too, and knew the direction that they needed to go. However, we were blessed with people like Leon Bibb and Mr. Cloud and Charlie Warren and Vic and Mr. C.
Robert C.
Bob C. that were equally as astute in fiscal management and the direction that I wish I would have been old enough to have been able to sit in on how they came up with the design of the church, how they wanted it to look, because I know they had to have a vision of some sort in their mind that when they walked in, this is what I would like for it to look like. But I wasn't old enough. I just wasn't old enough. But I was smart enough to know later on that the leaders that brought the church out of the ground and did the great things that they did, they looked way out here.
What about Mr. Goodrich?
Well, Mr. Goodrich, I don't remember him as well as others. George Grice was an English professor at Austin P at the time. He was dynamic, and he had a house out on off of Ashland City Road. I think it's Robin Hood Road, and it was like, gosh, you went out there, and the whole world opened up. You drove down to the end of this lane, and this big opening showed up, and there was Dr. Grice's house, and there were a lot of gatherings there, a lot of them. And of course, we were devastated, and I as well, even as young as I was, when he passed away early in the life of the church, because he really was one of those guys that took us around the corner, as best I recall.
As a child, what are some things you remember doing in the building? Do you remember hiding, seek, or do you?
I don't remember hiding. What I remember more than anything, I think, were the Sunday school classes. Cannot tell you who it was that led my Sunday school class, but I remember that they were very interesting, and they were very intriguing. They kept me really involved. But when we had fellowship gatherings, just for a buffet or anything like that, it just seemed like children were everywhere. And as I said, everything was centered around downstairs because that's where all the activity went on. And worship to me at that point in time was, I understood that that's what you're supposed to do. And I enjoyed them. And I really liked listening to Dad preach, but I got on to him a number of times, say, you need to cut it down just a little bit. It's going a little bit too long. And I can remember at several of the churches as I grew, he would, good speakers, as you do, Skip, you peruse the congregation, is you don't want to lock in on one person, you want to keep everybody engaged. And Dad get on a roll. He's pretty. When he got on a roll, he was pretty wordy. And he looked back at me, and I go like that. And, it wouldn't be long. He'd take the hint, but he got his message delivered very well.
Do you remember where your Sunday school class was?
If I went downstairs, I could probably show you.
Okay.
I could probably show you. That's kind of vague too, and that's what made me feel really kind of uncomfortable. I still feel comfortable here, but I felt uncomfortable because my memory wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. It wasn't giving me clear pictures. As I was stating before, we were here, brought it out of the ground, and as soon as we got it out of the ground, we were gone. The convention sent us away. And so the memories, were just boxed in real close, tight, in a short period of time at a really, really impactful time in my personal life. So I'd have to walk and see, Skip. I probably could do that downstairs, but I do. Those are the best as I can recall.
Looking at this picture, does it bring memories of any individual or any
Well, the first people that jump out to me are Mr. and Miss Bill. And David and I were the same age. And so he was a pal back in those days. And then oddly enough, when I came back to Austin Peay to go to college, I chose industrial arts as my career. And guess who the lead dog was? Dr. Bill. And he was the toughest instructor I ever had in my entire high school in bachelor and master's studies. He was great, but he was the toughest I ever had. He really was. I don't know who this gentleman on the left with his legs crossed. Do you know who this is?
You're the first one, isn't it?
James Hinton.
And this looks like Bill Cloud back here.
That's Bill Cloud, that's right.
And
Yeah.
Lewis Johnson right beside him.
And Lewis and I later in life, when I came back to Clarksville after moving away to go to college at Austin Peay, Lewis and I became really close friends.
On the camera, say which Lewis it is. Lewis who?
Lewis.
His last name.
Lewis Johnson. And he's quite a character too.
The camera doesn't pick us when we're talking, so.
Oh, it doesn't pick you up.
No,
I'm
it doesn't
sorry.
pick us up.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's a shame. But
Lewis
no.
Senior or Lewis Junior?
Junior.
Okay.
Junior.
He's coming back, I think, Justin coming
Well,
back.
and that brings me to another conversation about when Lewis and I got back together after all those years. He was in the office supply business, I believe, isn't that right now? And he was touring, I think he had gone to Trinity Episcopal. And then, talking one day, he said, I think I'm going to go back to Hilldale. And I said, well, he said, I don't know. I just feel like I need to go back to Hilldale. And as I've said to you many times, Skip, there's some things that occur, and I think the revelation to me is that you can't put your finger on a lot of things. You can't just really say this is what did what. But in your formative years, when you're young and watching things happen, it's kind of like watching a tree grow. It grows really, really slow. And it doesn't happen quite as fast as a child would always want it to. But when you get older and you saw that little sprout, and then you come back 40 years later and my goodness, it's a fully mature tree, you say, gosh, what did I miss in between all this? So I think that's probably what drives Lewis. I know how he feels. It's clear how he feels. And I feel the same way. I thought it was pretty exciting to meet in the cafeteria of a school and then come by every other day or once a week and see what the building itself looked like. That was a very curious time for me. And I've always been really intrigued by structures and more specific older structures. But watching one come out of the ground, that was really the first time I'd seen something like that happen.
And it happened so quickly. I mean, within a year and a half.
Yeah.
Y'all were in the building.
Yeah, and that was another thing that was so exciting. As I said, we would come by sometimes every day, and then every other day, maybe once a week. But as the building, walked its way vertical, everybody got more and more and more excited, and frequently you'd find more people up here, just looking to see what was going on as the structure was coming out of the ground. And then the wood in the trim work, I thought was really cool with the wood on the ceilings and especially the beams and the arches that developed the sanctuary. And then on the back in the very back of the sanctuary, of course, that stained glass window was not there at that time. So over the years, I have been able to watch as the stained glass has gone in and developed all of those things. I'll tell you a special Sunday, a special Sunday for me was Easter Sunday when all the lilies came in. And of course, Mother always made sure that there was an Easter lily here for my father, who we lost in Korea. And that brings me to another really cool point, is that Dad then really encouraged discussion about my father. He was never selfish about it at all. As a matter of fact, he told me, he said, I want to know him. Because, you know, he obviously had to be special to have your mom and then have you. And as time went on, he can tell you stories about my natural father as well as I can. And that was encouraging. But the white lilies at Easter were a special time for my mother, and of course became a very special time for me. And so that one is very clear. The choir, of course, the Clouds were big in the choir then, they're big in the choir now. And pretty robust choir, pretty robust bunch. And I can't remember who the organist was at the time, but whoever that was, it was a very vibrant bunch back there. And Dad joined in. He was a very good singer. And as a matter of fact, he sang with the Jordanaires at one point in time. He was a fill-in for them. Not backing up Elvis Presley, but singing with the Jordanaires in their early formative years. And he still to this day enjoys singing. He joins into the church that they're in Louisville. They ask him frequently to join in with their productions. And he leads them and sings them. And as his father and his brother were very good vocalists as well in East End Methodist Church up in Nashville.
Do you remember anything special about Christmas? Any Christmas programs or anything like that?
You know, that's one thing I was really trying to think about. I mentioned the Easter thing, and I really, Skip, I really don't. As I said, it bundled in so quick, and then we moved on. And during those times, we didn't get much of a chance to come back. Of course, Dad was preaching on Sundays, so we didn't get much of an opportunity to come back here until later on. And of course now, the church just charms him anytime they ask him to come. He says he's just so thrilled to be here. Let's see, Dad's 85 now and still walks a couple of miles a day. Walks 9 holes of golf. He doesn't ride, he walks. And still very active and just as clear and as sharp as he can be. And, still kind of carries himself very much the same as ever. So, and I know that he's terribly excited about coming and doing for you what you've asked him to do. He considers this obviously a special place for him too. Help me along.
You do.
Well, you got the early history. Do you remember the first sunrise service? Supposedly the first worship service on the grounds was the Easter
Well, it
sunrise.
was. And boy, let me see if I can tackle that one for you. That was before we were actually in the church. Mm-hmm. And I do remember because to some degree, because Dad said that next Sunday we're going to bring this thing out of the ground, and we're going to do it on the grounds up there at sunrise and make it a very special day. And the dogwoods were just lit up that day. And I always thought it was really, really neat that they set up on a hill, and you had to drive up a hill to get to it. And once you got here, you could just look out over everything. And of course, take into account Madison Street was just this was almost out of city limits.
It was not part of the city limits.
And as best I recall, right up where the hospital used to be, up at the intersection, was the first. No, it wasn't either. You're right. It was up at the light at Kroger.
At
Liberty Parkway.
And the our entrance to the church was a county road at that time.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But it was a long way out. And there was a restaurant up on the corner up here that we would frequently eat at on Sundays after church, as well as what was the Cumberland Grill
Plaza.
called? The Plaza. We'd eat there because we lived right behind it, so it was a natural path to go from the church right back that way. And we'd eat there more frequent than not. And then go visit my grandparents who lived in downtown on Greenwood. And then my other set of grandparents were on Cumberland Drive.
Did he lead the sunrise service, or was it a youth sunrise service? Or
I
do you
can't
remember?
answer that
Yeah.
directly. I really can't answer that one directly. What does history tell you?
What's written, what Margaret Bibb wrote, said the youth did.
Okay. Well, then, guarantee if she wrote it, that's what happened. But I do not recall that. Sure can't.
Mel, what questions do you have?
Oh, I'm so happy with what he said. I couldn't ask you anything else. I'm just delighted.
Any other memories? Do any of the pictures give you any other memories?
Well,
People.
That's the thing I'm having the hardest thing with. I see some, well, Bill, of course, Bill and Lewis are the two that jump out at me.
Remember Mike Taylor?
I can't say that I do.
Okay, he's my age. He's but he's in there.
I wish I could. Boy, if I had Dad here, he could call them off name by
Oh,
name.
give him the list. Give him the list of names right here. Maybe
It's kind of hard
the
to
list will
look at them and
That's
read
okay.
them at the same time.
That's
but
okay.
See the names that you.
Now, Dad speaks often about Mr. Goodrich. And I think that and Ewing Trout was a really strong guy too. This is a big help. This is a big help. Go ahead. I'm just
No,
working.
you're good. You're good.
Gosh, I see Charlie Warren now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can tell it. Charlie Warren. And Mr. Cloud right next to him. Huh. What is this? The fifth row? 1, 2. My word, I didn't realize that Creason Briggs was also Charlie.
I didn't.
I really did not realize that. And Riggs, this is curious. Riggs Hayes was really close friends with my natural father.
Is that right?
Yeah, they were very close friends. And
Now he was the father of.
Chip and Jay.
Okay, how does Charlie Warren's wife fit into that? She was a Hayes. Was she Marvin's daughter?
I think so.
Okay.
I think
So they're all
You're
cousins.
right. There was a little loop in there, and
Yeah.
I couldn't piece it all together. But Dad stayed involved even when he was here, involved heavily with youth programs, not just at Hilldale, but we spent quite some time at Lake Junaluska, and he ran youth programs there. And as he went on in his career, up until he was probably 45 or 50, he stayed heavily involved in summer youth programs at camps like Lake Junaluska and Birchville Springs. And I can remember spending a lot of summers there. And then as we went on, of course, at the Bose Conference Center up in Montego and such as that. Oh, the Pruitts. Miss Jerry Pruitt.
Miss Jerry she died not long ago.
I know. What a beautiful lady.
She was.
She died about 2 years ago.
Yeah, and Jackie, her son, and I have remained friends over the years, but he was considerably younger than I am.
I couldn't recognize her from that picture. I'm amazed. That's maybe how you remember.
Golly, what are we, 2014? This is around 52 or 3?
54.
60 years.
Yeah, it's just hard to fathom it. But who was this next today? Mabel Martin. Doesn't help y'all either? Okay. oh, Miss Holland Hope lived where Kroger is now. That neighborhood, Delmar Drive and Liberty Parkway and all back through there, was really one of the first formative subdivisions, around.
After the war, anyway.
Uh-huh. And the Hopes, her husband was in the service, and she ran a daycare center out of her home.
Oh.
And Mother would go over there and visit them to some degree. Guilford Atkins, I believe did he have a automobile repair shop?
He had several leadership positions.
Yeah. Gee whiz, I should have gotten to this before I got here so I could start and talk to Dad, and I'd have really had some stuff to talk about.
Well, he's coming in June, and we'll interview him then.
Yeah, and I'll prepare, as a matter of fact,
I've got other copies of that.
if I could send some of this to him, he'll really be ready for you.
Okay.
And he can really do a good job with it.
And I need a picture of him.
I'm working on
Okay.
it. Jeff Bibb
I know he asked you.
got in touch with me, and I think I know exactly the picture I want if I can put my hands on it. It's exactly this time,
Okay.
which would be perfect. And it's a portrait of him, so it would be appropriate for what you're trying to
We'll
do.
give it back to you. We just need to see.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
sure. I just gotta find the doggone
Okay, I
thing.
understand.
If it's like in your home, I have a cardboard box with those older pictures in them. Where do we go from here, guys? I don't know where to go.
I'm thrilled.
Well, this has been fine. This is perfect.
This is
I
wonderful.
mean, we can only use about 2 or 3 minutes. on
And I
Sunday
hope
morning.
that's all you use, but and I hope
But
it's
we're
helped
going
to
to
some
keep
degree.
this on archives anyway. Your whole interview here.
Sure.
We'll keep that
Okay.
for the future, and you'll see yourself on the web.
Thank you, Skip. I can't wait to do that. I just can't wait.
No,
I'll tell
you'll
you.
you'll come in August, won't you?
Oh, certainly.
Okay. See if I can get my big brother over here.
Now, what's happened to you since you left here? You went to high school where?
That's another story,
Okay.
and a pretty good one. Well, let me go from when we left here.
Okay.
The convention sent us to
It's
Wayne-
conference.
Conference, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sent us to Waynesboro, Tennessee,
Yeah.
and which, again, I say was as polar opposite of Clarksville, Tennessee as anything on it. Mom and I didn't quite know what to think, but we adjusted. But it wasn't quite the experience that we'd hoped for. And at that time, through some very deep thought, Dad decided it was time to move on. So we left Waynesboro, and a friend of his, Charlie Rice, was an Episcopal priest in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. He was a college buddy of Dad's. And he told Dad, he said, you might want to think about the Episcopal Church. So we moved to South Pittsburgh and they had a very large rectory in South Pittsburgh. It was big enough for probably 4 families. And so we moved in there for the summer. And Dad and Father Rice talked it over the summer, and having been a graduate of Emory with the divinity degree, he got into St. Luke's School of Theology at University of the South. And we moved to the mountain,
To Swain.
Swain, and lived in university housing, married couples housing. And about halfway through, the bishop of the Episcopal Church gave Dad the church in Winchester, Tennessee. So we moved down the mountain. He drove up the mountain every day to school at St. Luke's, and I went to school at Franklin County Public Schools for the time being. That's when I was in the 5th grade. And when he finished his studies at St. Luke's, then he was ordained in that church by the bishop and he was given the church full time. And from there, I went to public school until the 8th grade, and Swanee Military Academy was a portion owned by the Episcopal Church on the mountain. And a lot of my friends went to school there. They were legacies, their brothers, their fathers, and everybody had gone to school there. And Winchester was just such a vibrant community, a little small town, about 6,000 people. But golly, the people were so educated, and it was a wealthy area. And all of these friends of mine were going to school at the military school. And Mom and Dad said, "You want to go?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure." And I was 4'11", 89 pounds. I was just, a little old string bean nothing. And boy, I threw myself into something I didn't know what I was getting into. But it was probably 4 of the best and most formative years that I spent in military school. And they did you just like in the military. They bring you in just like they find you, and they break you and they build you back up. But I wasn't much of a breaker, so I just said, I'll do it my way. And I was labeled a preacher's kid. And the commandant wasn't very fond of that. But that was his problem, not mine. Mm-hmm. And but I was lucky enough to play football with Philip Fulmer and Bobby Majors, and grew up with them, and a lot of other young men that are still some of the greatest friends I've ever had. We keep in touch. We're all over the world, but we keep in touch.
Do you remember Judy Cloud?
Oh, absolutely. Judy is from that area. She's from Belvedere.
That's why I asked. Yeah.
And I didn't know that until later on when Bill and I were in JC's together. And he told me that Judy was from Belvedere. And it's odd that a number of friends that I have, there's another friend that I have here in town, Mac Beals. His wife is also from Belvedere. And so there are a lot of connections between the two towns. And yet Judy's just, she's the best. She's the bomb.
So after high school, you came to Austin Peay?
Came straight back to Austin Peay. I was accepted at, excuse me. I applied at the academy. You were required to take ACT, SAT, and college boards your junior and senior years. And their reasoning for that was to give you a second chance to get everything done. So I applied to Vanderbilt, and I applied to Arkansas, where my best friend from the academy was going to go, in Austin Peay, and was accepted at all 3, but decided I'd come to Austin Peay. So I came back here when I was 18, and gee whiz, having lived in a closed, compact society like the academy was, 275 guys living together day in and day out. We lived in a microcosm of what the world really was. So when I came to Austin Peay, I said, my word, there really is something else to live with. And, every day was an adventure. And not that I hadn't been exposed. I was exposed to some of the greatest things that have left lasting impressions on me, but when I came back to Austin Peay, it was like, my goodness, I can make my own decisions. I can go here today, I can go there in an hour if I want to, and I don't have to ask permission to do it. And these were really big life-changing events for me. And so I wasn't really a great student at the academy, and I wasn't really a great student when I came to Austin Peay, and I came to find out, well, I'm really not ready for this. So I dropped out for a while and worked for a while, then I'd go back. And when I went back, the best thing that happened to me was joining the fraternity, which was ATO, which was Nell with your brother Mike, and because it demanded academic success, and it took me through. And from that, I got a degree, and then 10 years later, I went back and was offered an assistantship, graduate assistantship at Austin Peay, and used that to get a master's degree.
So what do you do as a career?
My main career, my main career at the time I worked with my family at Oregon Building Supply. And spent the formative, I think my professional career there for 20 years. And during all this, I know where you're going. I know where you're taking this. During all of this, Nell, when you were in school, Coach Miller asked me to come out and help with the wrestling team at Clarksville High School in 1968. That's a 20-year-old undergrad at Austin Peay. I said, Coach, I'm not really a coach, but I promise you they'll be in the best shape they've ever been in their life. And so I started coaching wrestling as an undergraduate. The Booster Club paid me $100 a month in my mileage and my meals, and I thought I'd hit the mother lode, man. It was great. But I was doing something I loved to do too. And from that, I just, as you know, Skip, I just retired after 46 years. So my career took it from Oregon Building Supply. I went from there and taught school at Clarksville High School at the request of Dr. Worthington, who was the principal at the time, and great guy, gave me a great opportunity. And then we had some unfortunate things happen with my wife. She was a nurse, and the big money winner, she had some back problems, and there was a chance that she might not ever walk or be able to work again. So I had to give up the teaching and go back into the public sector. And I went to work for the gas and water department and worked there for the last 13 years of my career. And from where I retired. And now I am working a pro shop at Eastland Green, subcontracting a house for Joe Wynn, who was a wrestler for me in high school, and then doing whatever else I really feel like doing.
So at Clarksville High, the wrestling team,
Yeah.
how many state champions?
Well, I got Matt McCarty twice. I got David Adams once. I got Michael Dye one. I got Bruno Reagan, who just is graduating this year, twice. And so I guess that's, if I count two twice, that's 4, 5, 6.
But as a team, how many?
One state championship in dual wrestling, and one state championship in the team championship.
Right. Okay.
And that was in the year 2000. We were runner-up in second and third place for 4 to 5 years running right in there. We were just dancing all over. In 2000, nobody could touch us. We were just unbeatable. We had that team. The one that you always dream about. And that was it. We really had it. But we've had such special young men along the road. We've got one now that's a member of this church, Kyle Russell, that I think is one of the finest wrestlers we've ever had or ever will have. And it just didn't, he had it this year, and it just got away. But it wasn't because of lack of effort or anything that he did wrong. It just happened. But he's a state champion in my mind, I can tell you this. And he's a champion in life in my mind. He really is. And of course, he's got a senior year coming up. And I don't think anybody can stop him. I really don't. And it's been such a treat to be around he and his family. They're such wonderful people, EK and Jason. You know, they lead by example. And their demands are almost pathetic. That you can look at them and see them, and EK, you can almost tell what she's thinking. I don't know about y'all, I don't know if you can see it, but I can. And Jason's more introverted, but you can see he's clicking all the time too. He's looking down the road. And two of the most they're never on the mat, I can assure you that. They're two of the fiercest competitors I've ever seen anywhere. And all the parents that I've been through over the years, they're right there at the top of, top competitors, just tough. But that's a good tough. That's not a bad tough. They're just, and wonderful people too, and wonderful leaders.
Any parting thoughts?
Well, You know, Skip, as I sit here and look, I could probably sit here for, 30, 45 minutes, and things may become a little bit clearer. But I think the thing that I feel the most is every time I walk in this sanctuary, it always feels the same. It never changes. The faces may change, but this never changes. This is the constant. And I've never felt uncomfortable coming here. I don't come as often as I should, but by the same token, when I am here, I always feel welcome and always feel warm. Every time I see you, I see a lot of things from my past. I see a lot of things in Dad. When you're just not you're not the guy. If you weren't wearing the cross, if you were just walking down the street, nobody knew you were a minister. But you touch them in some way. I know that, and that's what it's all about. And when you look at the full circle of things, and as I told you about Dad, you remind me very much of him because that's the way he led. I think Hilldale has been blessed over the years to have those kind of leaders. They really have, and I've known most of them. I met most of each and every one of them. Enjoyed a meal with them at some point in time here, but I don't know. But even Madison Street, I promise you, does not have that kind of legacy. As long as it's been around, it doesn't have the legacy that Hilldale has in having the leadership and the constant. The change has not been a dramatic change. It's been a level change as you've gone through the leaders and the ministers here. And that's quite unique. It's quite unique in any organization, but more so in the foundation and the substance of a church and its life as it goes on. So 60 years, really it's kind of a short time.
It is a short time.
To me, it seems really short. It doesn't seem so long ago.
Go to Europe and that's short.
Yeah. But how lucky could that be? And then I said, I look at the youth programs that you do and the outreach programs that you do. And I read that bulletin, don't you think I don't? I do. But it's the right stuff and for all the right reasons. And you've been blessed to have a group of people that follow you. But they lead by example, and your leadership and the youth are so into it. Let me put it that's the best word. Maybe that's an up-to-date word. But they seem so into it, and what a great foundation for the next generation.
Right.
And done well. You really have. And it's. I'm proud to be able to sit here and talk to you about this. Not that I'm a visionary or anything like that, but in my vision, I would have never dreamed that it would be where it is today, starting 60 years ago.
Well, wait till you see what's about to occur.
I have no idea, but I'm sure it's special.
We got 60 more years.
It's a great way to take off with it.
Yeah.
And they're blessed to have you, Skip, and I'm blessed to have you.
Nell, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it
you
so
so
much.
much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Bringing me back on.